Quote, "A writer in the act of writing must fear neither his own words nor anything else in the world. A writer who is afraid is no true writer." End quote. By the time she wrote this in 1937, Irmgard Keun knew a lot about writing and fear. Born in Berlin in 1905 and initially trained as an actress, Keun wrote a series of brilliant novels in the 1930s depicting the sex lives and career struggles of young urban women in Germany. Keun was a glamorous figure of 1920s Berlin. Irmgard Keun established the concept of modern girl culture with a heroine who is part of the workforce, sexually emancipated with a strong personality, hunger for life, and not enough money to pay rent in German literature. Keun turned her attention to giving a voice to those who had never had any real literary representation. In giving us the dark underside of the glamorous golden 20s, Keun came to be decried as an exponent of what the Nazis called asphalt literature with anti-German tendencies. During World War I, with men away at war, working-class women entered the labor force. Women made more progress in Germany in the 1920s than in any other state. The New Woman was one of the anticipations trying to bridge the transition from the present into the future and modern girl figure. In all three of Keun's novels, the young women from the lower middle class undergo the process of societal discouragement that took an emotional toll on these women. Despite the differences of their characters, all three of the women in the novels realize that they deserve greater social, political, and economic opportunities. These daring, provocative stories described young women shedding gender roles and adopting more modern and urban attitudes towards love and life. In the novel's first line describing a letter to Santa immediately establishes writing as an act with immense power. Quote, "You can open an envelope and take out something which bites or stings, though it isn't a living creature." End quote. After Midnight vividly describes the terror of growing up in a world gone mad. It's also a story about being a teenager, getting drunk, and falling in love and not understanding why adults are always getting in your way. Santa and her friend Gertie would rather speak of love than politics. Though she guides us through a series of bars, cafes, and restaurants, accompanied by her glamorous best friend, Santa is often left desperately alone in the dark corners of a room or out on the street. When crossing town one evening to meet up with Gertie's Jewish lover, a blockade cuts off the girls' path. It is the Fuhrer in a motorcade procession, and the crowd goes mad, striving to catch a glimpse of Hitler's raised empty hand. Then the parade is over, and in the long hours after midnight, Santa and Gertie will face betrayal, death, and the heartbreaking reality of being young in an era empty of innocence or romance. As the reader, I felt as if her After Midnight really painted a clear picture of what life was like during the brutality of this era in Nazi Germany. Keun portrays Santa as somewhat hollow or ignorant of politics. Her personal relationships aren't excused. Santa and her girlfriend Gertie are interested in their love lives. After Midnight discloses the pervasive effect politics had on the normal life in Nazi Germany. Santa's narration adds touches of innocence and normalcy to a tale of people who, one way or another, have been outsiders in their own country. With the mix of people Santa knows, her thoughts and their comments, the book provides a perspective on day-to-day life in pre-war Germany. A work of nonfiction would find it difficult to capture. It exposes human madness and hopeful humanism. It was full of light and passion. The style is gorgeous. Life continues in all its beauty and involvedness in love and friendship, but the caged doors of the police state have closed over and the world has ceased to make any sense. The world is unspeakably dangerous. Saying the wrong thing, expressing the wrong thought, being seen with the wrong person can mean death. For Santa, however, the ordinary concerns of adolescence are enlarged to a fever pitch. Mouthing off to your nosy, mean-spirited neighbors, remarking on how much Hitler sweats when he speaks, or refusing the advances of a soldier can mean ending up in an SS prison. Under Keun's ice-cold satire beats a fierce, hot, and its glorious, funny, intensely lovable Santa who elevates this book from satirical to uplifting. There's not a word out of place or a sentence that isn't beautiful. And as the novel moves toward its distressing final pages, as the novel continued, I gradually wished nothing more but for Santa's world to remake itself into the ordinary and let her love and be loved in peace. Many young women, regardless of their education and social experience, set their sights on becoming part of the privileged urban social scene in the 1920s, which they hope to achieve through the attentions of successful men with whom they flirt and often seduce. The German writer Irmgard Keun published her first novel, Gilgi, One of Us, in 1931 at the age of 26. The novel was an immediate bestseller, catapulting her to literary stardom. Keun was more than just a smart and witty storyteller of women's lives. Her books are sexually honest and wildly funny, her female narrators are sharp-tongued and sharp-eyed, and she's a master of using a naive or innocent narrator as a vehicle for delivering blistering satire. In Keun's novels, she's trying to establish her independence in a society being overtaken by fascism. She is depicting all of the woman's issues in the 1920s. At the time for its treatment of sexual harassment, abortion, single motherhood, and the new woman, all Keun wanted to do is remain a perceptive and beautiful woman while constructing novels about women's paths to maturity. These are feminine novels written by a woman, and it gives expression to the model of the new woman that blossomed in Weimar. Keun is an independent woman in her spirit and free in her sexuality, which is aware of her feminine power and does not like disusing it manipulatively in a very masculine world so as to climb the social ladder and fulfill her desires. Keun represented modern young women who were seduced by the promises of a new era and caught within the cultural crisis of modernity and its economic and conceptual limitations. During this era, many things were going on that affected all parts of the society. As Germany took a turn in history through the dictatorship of Adolf Hitler and the totalitarianism control, the freedom that Keun once had with her work was shattered. With Hitler now in control of each and everything in society, freedom of speech and publishing books that go against the government was prohibited. She was condemned by conservatives, and her openly critical stance of the Nazi Party ensured that censure would become official when the Nazis formally came to power in 1932. Irmgard Keun was an extraordinary person, exile survivor, a woman whose husband disowned her once she spoke out against the Nazis, and who raised a child alone without ever publicly disclosing who her daughter's father was. Although she was working on an autobiography, it was never found. Quote, "God forgive me for my sins," she wrote to a friend, "but I can really write," end quote. Irmgard Keun was possessed of a spectacular talent. She managed to convey the political horror she lived through with the lightest possible touch, even flashes of humor. She continued to write and publish after the war, although never quite with the success or the dizzying prolificacy of her early years. She enjoyed a second wave of literary fame when her novels were reissued in the late 1970s and died in 1982. Her work stands as a brilliant record of the era she survived. Overall, this novel has opened my eyes to the reality of what Keun went through in pursuit of fulfilling her destiny. Keun's motivation to live and continue her legacy of being set apart from the harsh society that was disabling her to fulfill her dreams was such an inspiration to me. Thereby, her drastic motives to successfully fake her suicide really reflected her mission in life. Keun simply wanted to write, and she did whatever she could to be involved with different forms of art and literature. Though the government had its say in her lifestyle and views of the policies, practices, and overall corrupt dictatorship, Keun snuck back into Germany under the radar and lived on her legacy, which eventually led to After Midnight being published in English. Quote, "My heart always stands still when I hear those speeches, because how do I know I'm not one of the sorts who are going to be smashed? And the worst is that I just don't understand what's really going on. I'm only gradually getting the hang of things you must be careful not to do," end quote.